Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg, as always. Here to recap college basketball's last week, preview the next week college basketball. We're nearing the end of February and heading into March. Greg, how you doing?
It's just I'm just trying to figure out like half these teams we're going to talk about. I was just looking through my picks last week, and I guess like I picked the sensible, or I don't know if they were necessarily favored, but like the sensible pick on basically most of them. The only like 50-50 game we picked last week was Kentucky Auburn. I took Kentucky. I think you took Auburn, but like I'm looking through my picks for this week, and I don't know, man. I just like keep picking all these favorites, and like I don't know.
Yeah, Greg, you took a bath last week in our picks. Not the best week for you. It's just a week on week out thing. Sometimes people have good weeks. Sometimes people have bad weeks, and it's not based off of I think following the sport is like one of those things. The more you learn, the less you know, type of things. And sometimes you get hot, sometimes you don't. It's kind of like with gambling or going to the casino. It's just one of those things. And I'm excited for March because of it. Because we don't know what version of these teams will show up. We talk about, Kentucky maybe going to a Final Four, maybe being out in the round of 32, or maybe stuff like that happening all the time these last couple tournaments. It's gonna be fun to watch. But Greg, let's start with Ohio State firing Chris Holtmann. They did it midweek last week. The first game after that, they ended up getting that, hey, we fired our coach boost. We see that in the NFL. We see that in all these other sports all the time of, hey, we fire our coach. The next game, that team usually gets a win. That team usually at least plays well. If it's not going to get a win, they beat Purdue. Purdue looked a little bit unbeatable for a long stretch there, and then they lose to Ohio State. And again, I don't think anything changed for Ohio State schematically from Wednesday, Thursday till Saturday. It was just, hey, or till Sunday. It was just a nice little boost and nice change, and I guess that maybe helped them.
Joe is always the first one to say when a there's an NFL coaching change or whatever, he'll text in our group chat and be like, "Here, put money down on this," or when somebody has a baby or something like that. Hey, but if this is, I mean, like this is that effect, and combined with just the weirdness that has been this year. Purdue doesn't change a lot in my mind, other than just kind of maybe they're still on that top tier with UConn, but I think clearly now UConn is the one, the only. They've been first in the rankings every week for I think 6 weeks now for a reason. Purdue's not taking a big step down for me though. I mean, the loss stinks, but I don't think I'm going to look at them and relook at the resume after their third loss and say, well, now the same questions that we have are there, and the same strengths that we had before are there.
Yeah, I think it very much is a hey, make their guards beat you. And Edie did have a good game, but Lawyer didn't have the best game in this one. Lance Jones didn't shoot the ball very well. That's what the game plan's going to be. And if those guys can hit their shots, they could go all the way to a title. If they don't, they could lose really early again. So that's just like you said, not much changes. It's just surprising that Ohio State was able to get that game plan to work. One quick note here, Greg. We have Tommy Lloyd getting a contract extension. He'll be with Arizona through 2029. I don't know if you had any quick thoughts on that one.
No, just something I feel like we got to mention, because there's a program that obviously they went through the Sean Miller stuff, and now he's back at Xavier. So, but I think unquestionably, yes, they had the early exit last year, losing to Princeton as a 2 seed, and Princeton is the 15 seed. But I think you gotta, as an Arizona alum or fan, you got to be liking where the program is at. I can't remember, but I feel like there was big talk for them to hire an alum instead of Tommy Lloyd, or maybe I'm thinking of Texas before they brought in Beard. Maybe that was Durant leading the charge for. I feel like I remember Arizona talking a lot. Maybe I'm thinking of Texas when they hired Beard. But you gotta, what you got now. You gotta be liking.
I'm with you. I do think that this sport does see a little bit of an unfair criticisms of some coaches, and I think in this regard, Tommy Lloyd kind of beat the unfair criticism allegations, right? Like, yes, he goes 33-4 his first year, and then last year, I should say, he loses 15 seed. Well, when Kentucky loses to the 15 seed, they get endless. Oh, Calipari's lost it, and this guy stinks. And then when you have Matt Painter losing all these double-digit seeds, let's just say the tournament's a crapshoot. It is a crapshoot. He's done a very good regular season job at Arizona so far. Give him a contract extension. It's only until 2029. If he starts screwing things up in the next couple of years, you can still fire him. It's very, very results in March matter the most. We know that, but at the same time, what you do during the regular season probably shows more of the stability of what you have. So good for him to get the contract extension. Maybe a little bit premature in my eyes, but at the same time, lock him up, see what you got. Now, Greg, the last thing we have to talk about before we get to our recap of last week, the top 16 was revealed. Doesn't really mean anything at this point. There's just so much basketball to be played left that I don't think anything can be gleaned from it other than, I mean, we both saw Wisconsin in there, and they've been on a slide. They must be valuing those quad one wins because Wisconsin has 6 of them. And that's the only thing that really, I mean, that's a lot to have going for you, but there's some real struggles over the last couple of weeks here.
Yeah, that was the thing that stuck out, and not that they don't deserve it, but well, I mean, San Diego State sneaking in as a 4 was a little bit interesting. I know we've talked a lot about the Mountain West. They just worked their way. I believe they just worked their way back into the top 25 this week, or were they? See, now so many teams in that back end of the top 25 move in and out that I'm keeping track of that in like 19 to 25. I have a little bit of trouble with. So, but in terms of the AP poll, I believe they were 19th today, so they wouldn't be where the AP wouldn't have them where the committee does. I mean, it's all relative. The end all be all is what the committee says. So the AP poll is meaningless outside of giving you a chance to know, hey, this is what you maybe want to pay attention to. So Wisconsin, you touched on it. I mean, they're especially after that. I would imagine they're on the ropes. So those are my 2 takeaways. So it is funny to have this revealed at what was it, 11 or noon or whatever, and then a couple hours later Kentucky beats Auburn. So I would think those two teams are in my mind right around the same. So I would think if this came out on Sunday, I would think maybe they'd flip flop. I know some people said Kentucky's resume is a little bit lighter than Auburn, but I mean, Auburn, you got to remember 2 weeks ago, Auburn didn't have a quad 1 win like at all. So I know that the script is kind of flipped on them a little bit, but
Yeah, I think Kentucky would still be a 5 seed in my mind, but they're playing their way up in that regard. Greg, 2 teams outside of the net top 20 have 6 quad 1 wins. Wisconsin is one of them. Can you name the other?
6 quad 1 wins outside of the net top 20.
I'm gonna give you a shot clock of 10 seconds
so,
here.
So,
bad podcasting.
So it's gotta be a team that is it FAU?
No.
Okay. I was just thinking of a team that would have a lot of so I'm not gonna guess it. Bad podcasting. That was my guess.
No, it is Texas A&M because they had a couple wins that were quad 2s turn into quad 1 wins. I believe it was 2 wins over Florida, I think is what they had, and Florida ended up being a quad 1 now. So they're up to 6 quad 1 wins. They also have, I think, 3 quad 3 losses, so that's what's holding them down. But one of the favorites we talk about all the time on this show is Texas A&M. Just a nice, interesting tidbit there, because if I asked it at a different point, it likely would give the answer away, since we're going to be talking about Texas A&M a little bit this week. Let's get to our recap of this past week, Greg. We had Kansas and Texas Tech last Monday. I took Texas Tech because of them not having a full lineup. Kevin McCullar is very important to this team, and I just thought him being out would be a big issue. And oh boy, was it, because we have a lot of teams losing, and injuries are hey, that's sometimes a reason why you don't play as well. 29 points on the road. You lose by 29 points. This is, all of our concerns are there about the depth with Kansas, and then one guy goes down, and yes, he's like an All-American type guy, but wow, 29 points to Texas Tech on the road.
Yeah, that Texas Tech team worked their way back into the back end of the top 25, like I kind of talked about. There's a lot of that shuffling on the back end, but I don't care who's out. This is the glaring, there's that I don't want to say roller coaster, but there's, we put our legal pad out and say, here's our pros of Kansas, and here's our cons of Kansas. And like this game screamed, hey, remember there's these cons over here that, if they're shorthanded, or God forbid, even if they have all of their roster, if one guy is having an off night, this is what it can look like for them, and this is what leaves them open to, they're probably going to be, a 1 or a 2 seed, coming into the March, but this is what leaves them open to, I wouldn't say, you could say this about any team. Just think about what we saw last year. It leaves them open to a first round exit, maybe not as a 1 seed. I just think it was fluky that we saw two of those two, but we've seen a lot of 15s over twos in the last 4, 5, 6 years. You could see that. You could also see them in the Final Four. It's going to depend on which Kansas we get, and you could write a list of teams that you could say that about, but Kansas, just one of them that this is kind of the Jekyll and Hyde effect, kind of glaring with them.
Yeah, I don't know if I can still trust them to take them far in the tournament just because they're like, hey, one injury, they could be down. If Johnny Furphy has a bad shooting night, the floor is not spaced, they could go down. If Hunter Dickinson gets in foul trouble, they move KJ Adams to the 4. That makes them really thin too. I don't know if really it makes them go down, but that makes them really thin too. So there's a lot of issues here. I do like Texas Tech as a team. I mentioned how they have multiple ball handlers. I'll talk about them too. I think them and Oklahoma are the two teams I've kind of commandeered in that middle of the pack Big 12. Teams that I think I like and think could win a tournament game, maybe two. That environment's always crazy too. It's one of the most underrated environments. We saw it with Chris Beard coming back last year, or what was it, 2 years ago at this rate. But it's definitely something to watch as well. So we'll see how they do in this Big 12, which is just a dogfight every night. Let's go to Tuesday, Greg. We have Illinois State and Indiana State. Indiana State ranked for the first time in 45 years. The last time they were ranked was directly after that 1979 national championship game with Larry Bird, and they lose. And just to clear everything up for them this week, they lost again this weekend. So it's now I believe they're tied with Drake in the MVC at the top of the MVC. Everything's still in front of them. An at-large bid is likely not going to happen for either of those schools anyway. It would have been tough. Indiana State had a shot if they would have won all their games the rest of the way, but it just makes it a little bit more pressure on them heading down the stretch.
Yeah, the only, and I may have said this on a previous pod, but the only way we were looking at a 2-bid MVC is if, like you mentioned, Indiana State would have been winning out, not losing these 2 games this week, and Drake maybe beats them in the MVC title game. I've heard some other podcasters and media pundits say, Matt Norlander's he's a big MVC guy. He's like me with the Mountain West, so he's big on that. I just I'm with you that we've been introduced to, well, I mean, it's not Robbie Vila's first year, but we've kind of been introduced to him on a national stage now. We love to see guys like that, love to hear stories like that. So it's unfortunate, but I mean, that's kind of the reality of being in a small conference. I kind of compared them to the A10. I think at one point this year, obviously they're a step down. It's gonna be a 1-bid league. I mean, there would have to be something miraculous. I don't even think either of those teams have the schedule to make it happen. But I would still expect Indiana State to win the MVC tournament. Like, it just doesn't change it. The only other unfortunate thing is I had a 3-leg parlay that included Indiana State because I said, they're not going to lose 2 straight games. They've been good. It's just Southern Illinois. Well, no, that was the only leg that didn't hit. So whatever.
Yeah, one of those, you get high on your own supply there, being ranked 23rd, and then you end up faltering. I have thought about this a little bit, Greg. It's a shame. It's a good thing for the sport that we have so much parity and that we have anyone can beat anyone in the tournament. 16s are beating 1s. But the regular season parity is going to cost us some things. We may not see Robbie Avila in the NCAA tournament. And Drake has a very good team, so I think Tucker DeVries could have a very good run in March as well. But we might not see Bronny James, Isaiah Collier, guys like that who were highly rated recruits. We might not see Cody Williams from Colorado. Like, it's going to be a weird world when we have all these like NBA stars who didn't even sniff March. It just a little bit different than it used to be. I feel like if you had NBA guys, you usually could find a way to make a tournament, especially if you had multiple of them. So just something different going on in the sport these last couple of years. Also on last Tuesday, we had Pittsburgh beating Virginia 74-63. Now, Greg, this is like what we thought Pittsburgh could do this year. They just haven't. Blake Hinson, 27 points. He also followed this up with a very big performance, I believe, with like 38 points against Louisville, and I think he was outscoring Louisville for most of the game on Saturday. It is Louisville, but still very impressive on his part. They get this win. Same thing with Virginia for me. I'm not going to spend too much time on them, Greg. It's like they can ruin someone's season by beating them any minute, but they also are not a team I believe in to win more than a game or two in a row in an NCAA tournament setting.
Yeah, that's Joe's given a foreshadowing to something I'm going to pick later. But it'll be my surprise pick of the week. Don't want to give too much away, but um, I don't know that we try not to. One of the things Joe pointed out, we try not to like repeat resumes and repeat things that we've said before. I don't know that we've taken an in-depth look at Pitt's resume up to this point. I mean, I don't want to say we've definitely looked at teams that have thinner resumes than Pitt. It's unfortunate for them that they're in the AAC. Blake Hinson's been a story since the Duke game, and that is their best win. I mean, he was a story before that, but the standing on the scorers table or whatever, that was when he made his announcement. I'm here. This game is also quad one. They haven't. I can't believe that this is a quad one win, but currently their win over NC State on the road is a quad one. I something tells me that's not going to stick around there. I mean, maybe it will, but they also beat Wake at home. That's quad two. Their only, quote unquote, bad losses are at home against Syracuse and at home against Mizzou. Those are kind of hurting them. They're sitting at 47 in the net. So team to keep an eye on. I mean, I'm not ready to crown them, but man, Blake Hinson could be, another one of those stories that we crave.
Definitely, I think one of the Diaz Graham brothers is out for the season too, so a little bit thinner than maybe they were last year, and I think that could hurt them. But ACC, anything's possible. Win a couple games here. I think they're 47th in the net right now. Move yourself up a little bit. Put yourself on the bubble. A lot of these Big East teams that have been on the bubble have lost, so you might get a
Let
shot.
me let me put it to you this way: it would be less. This is in my mind. It would be less crazy for this team to win the ACC tournament and secure themselves a bid than Georgia Tech going in at like under 500 or 500. What was that, 2-3 years ago? I know they ended up. We ended up seeing after the fact they had two dudes that were dudes, but this team has at least shown, they can be consistent. They can beat teams that are better than them, or you know prospectively better than them. So that's, I mean, I would be less surprised at this. Like that Georgia Tech team felt like, even though yes, we found out later, like, all right, those guys they had a couple of good guys. This would be less surprising, and maybe it has more to do with kind of where the ACC is at right now. So
Or preseason expectations are finally playing up to it. Like if you would have said that at the start of the year, like sure, it would have been tough to beat UNC and North Carolina or UNC and Duke, but like even then, we didn't think those teams were unbeatable or even as good as UNC has been. So, yeah, I think Pittsburgh finally playing up to the potential, which is it's about time, but plenty of time to still make a run at the tournament. Greg, Texas A&M, we mentioned them, 6 quad 1 wins, but they lost at Vanderbilt this week. Keep on shooting themselves in the foot in terms of the NCAA tournament. Unfortunately, some of their previous wins are turning out good for them, even though they didn't think it was going to be good at the as good at the start. So yeah, you never want to lose to Vanderbilt. That's going to hurt them a lot. They're probably still on the favorable side in the bubble, but they are squarely on the bubble, as with 6 quad 1 wins.
I know we've already said this before, but like this is a team we want to see in March, and we would just love to see them. At least Henry Coleman had a good game. Maybe he's showing that he's coming back from whatever on God's green earth has been going on with him. I know he's been hurt and in and out and whatnot, but man, this team's got a first or second team All American. They've got another great guard. I just like this team would be fun to see in March. And I already said it, dude. If they end up in the first four, tickets are $140 a pop. I don't care. We're going to Dayton. I ain't missing being the chance to see this team play live again.
This guy, he likes teams a lot, man. I don't know if I'd pay $140 to see this team who has 3 quad 3 losses, but hey, it's they are a good team. They are fun at times. It's just consistency's not there, and you wouldn't expect this out of a Buzz Williams coach team as well, like to let up on the gas. And I don't know, it's disappointing to see they're like I said, squarely going to be on the bubble. Those wins moving to quad 1 help them, but any other losses, you just keep on wondering like how many quad 3 losses can you go into the tournament with. They did have 2 quad 4 losses last year made the tournament, so we'll see what happens. All right, UNC and Syracuse. Syracuse upsets North Carolina 86-79. This does not affect my opinion of UNC whatsoever. They've struggled lately. I think they'll figure things out. So I'll just say Judah Mintz for Syracuse, worth watching. Possible All ACC selection. Syracuse has not been good this year, but it's good to get a win. I guess I don't know.
I mean, like, if you look at the record, like you'd be like, yeah, Syracuse. Like, I'm not even going to pull up their resume because I know it's not worth our time because it's in the ACC. This is without even looking. I can tell you this is by far their best win. They're not on anyone's radar. This is another top 10 team losing on the road to an unranked team. This is just a product of what this year has been. I think the last I heard, it's the percentage has gotten better, but it's still it's like 50-50 right now. So it's just weird. We don't need to rehash all this, but yeah, I mean, I'm not changing my tune on either of these teams. There's really not a ton else to say about it.
Nothing else for me as well. Move on to Ole Miss at Kentucky, and breaking news for the podcast. Greg is an idiot because he had a chance to go to this game and he did not. He did not join the boys. He put it on, oh, it's too late. I can't sell my Dayton tickets. Well, had a chance to see the Mecca for the first time in his life. He didn't go. I personally brought the mojo back to this Kentucky team, got him on the right track, gave him a pep talk. Kentucky beats Ole Miss. The things I like about it, the rotation was shortened for Coach Calipari. That's huge. Ugo Onyenso tied the Rupp Arena record for blocks in a game. Greg, trivia time. You can think while I finish this up. Who did he tie it with if you didn't hear
Nerlens Noel.
No, he didn't tie it with Nerlens Noel. But keep on going. He did not tie the record with Nerlens Noel. It's an opposing player. So, and also, he shortened the rotations, and they played defense. DJ Wagner being back really helped with this. His ball pressure has helped this week. So, big win for them. Ole Miss has struggled on the road, and Ole Miss has not really beaten the allegations that maybe some of their scheduling has kind of given them this nice record. So, they'll have to get back on the right track here and make sure they don't miss the tournament because they are squarely on the bubble now. Ole Miss is.
So I've heard the stat all week that he passed Nerlens for the team record. Now you said this is a Rupp record, not so it's an opposing player.
Yep.
This is probably recency bias, but like the first guy that comes to my mind, I not even necessarily a prolific shot blocker, but like, did Jabari Smith like come in and just go off or something? I can't think of. We don't need to spend 8 years on this. You tell me.
I hate doing trivia time on podcasts, but it's always fun to kind of see what you got up there in the old tank. I thought you might come down with this one because it's one of your favorite NBA players, David Robinson. So way back.
You know what? Now that I think about it, they did bring that up on the broadcast. Mm-hmm. I completely forgot about that, which you wouldn't have known because you were at the game. For the record, I did as we were sitting there. I was rewatching this game when we got home from the Dayton game, and I asked my wife. I said, "Would you have been mad if I'd have said, hey, I know we didn't sell my Dayton ticket, but can I go do this?" And she looked at me funny, and she's like, "No." So I could have gone. Just want to make sure to give props to Rachel, who wouldn't have cared, even though it would have been an unused ticket. I'm sure maybe last minute she could have got somebody to go, but I have said for years that I want to see a game at Rupp. Joe and I maybe at a later date can address why this at one point was an odd circumstance. I don't know if you want to get into that. I don't. Previous fandoms that I've realized I don't care about anymore, and
yeah, we'll just leave it at that. I mean, I'm not gonna take
that's off-season pod material.
Well, Greg's a recovering Duke fan, and I did not want to take a Duke fan to Rupp Arena, and also he was a very loud cheerer back then, and I did not want to have to defend him or end up being one of the people who fought him because he was being rude in Rupp Arena. So there we go.
Now, I still have the Marshall Plumlee jersey that my wife got me hanging in my closet. Okay? We still love Marshall, but other than that, I just realized that like I don't tune into Duke games like I do Xavier games, like I do Bengals games, like I do Texans games, like I do Reds games. I was like, I only like it because my best friend growing up down the street was a Carolina fan, and I just wanted to be different. That's it.
Not
So
not helping the allegations that all Duke fans are bandwagoners, Greg. That's all right. That's their prerogative, not mine. But any other thoughts on the game? I like the defense. I like the shortening of the rotation. I think that played a big part. And at different times, they're slowing the game down. I think that does help them as much as you might want to think. Like, hey, they have a good offense. Let's run. Let's run out there. It helps their defense when they slow things down.
so it's worth noting. I checked this morning. Yes, so they were 82 this morning. I'm not sure what changed, but they're now 81 in Ken Palm in defensive efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
That's up from over it was over 100. That's still not championship level, but it's going to take a couple of good defensive performances to let for that to really change. Where in your mind, and again, these numbers reflect what we see on the court. So like it's not necessarily like Joe, if they don't get to 40, if like they can't make the foot, that's not how these things work. Because every year we say, well, a team out these trends they get broken. All right, the game is changing. I heard someone say today, man, I feel like we've been in games in the 80s, like
Mm-hmm.
in terms of scoring more than ever. It just feels like that. Maybe that's anecdotal, but where would you want them to be that you'd be like, I am back in on this team as a national title contender, knowing that the number that we see on Ken Palm it reflects what we're seeing on the court.
I mean, it does, but I do oppose analytics as being like the end all be all. You know that I use it as a tool, but I do use it, and I do think they rose 30-ish spots in Ken Palm this past week via 2 games. We'll get to the other game here soon. I think they need to be top 50. Their offense is that good. I think if they can get up to top 50, there's been certain points where they flirted with that number. Then guys came back from injury. Then the rotations got messed up. Then Z got eligible. The rotations got mixed up again. It really moved things down. I think if you're top 50 with this offense, you can go on a run. If they don't get to top 50, then they're still a team that could lose in the round of 32 or make the Final Four, and that's just not a situation you really want to be in.
Just want to be clear here. If you're not pairing your analytics with your I told Joe that I've always loved college basketball from a story perspective, but I really started within the past couple of years looking more at X's and O's, trying to figure out stuff that's going on the floor. If you just look at numbers, if you don't watch a single college basketball game, you just look at everything in an Excel spreadsheet, you're missing. First of all, you're missing the fun. Second of all, you're not going to have a complete picture, because how many times have we seen a stat that is just like, man, that doesn't fit what I'm seeing here, and we could talk about the net for days, and how that's a different tool, but you get what I mean. All of these things go in a bucket for Joe and I to talk about, but you got to marry your knowledge on the two. You can't just say I'm just an analytics guy. I heard that this week about some coach. I can't remember. I was like, like it's helpful. It's a tool, but it's a tool. It's one building block for us to look at.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what we get. We talk about analytics all day with different sports. It's weird that college basketball has become the sport, other than maybe baseball, that's like the most analytically focused, and it just makes to me it makes not as much sense as understanding the full game and understanding if you're a coach, like, hey, you can't just use analytics. Sometimes you have to know that your sophomore guard had a terrible week and broke up with his girlfriend, and he can't handle it right now, so don't give him the last shot in the game. Stuff like that. It's just too much to it, and we try to do all of it here on the podcast. Greg, let's move on to Oklahoma and Baylor. Baylor beats them 79-62, kind of blows them out. Now, Oklahoma had a tough week this week. They had at Baylor, at Kansas, mentioned that, a team that was in the top 25, likely going to fall out of it because of that. Baylor's offense can really do some damage. They would be I would say a mini Kentucky. Their offense is good in terms of being efficient, having multiple guys who can score. Their defense is not quite where you want it to be, but they showed up in this game.
Yeah, if we had the technological proclivity to clip podcast clips that we from last week and put them here, this is where we put the clip of Joe saying basically exactly what was going to happen. Hey, Oklahoma snuck into the back end of the top 25. 2 rough games for them. They're going to be out. They'll have to get back in another. So give Joe his roses, give Joe his flowers. Here we are. That's exactly what happened. And predicting anything this year is tough. One of the things I do like, I do like that you said the mini Kentucky, because we look at Baylor and we've seen Yves Misi have big games. We've seen Ray J. Dennis have big games. We've seen Jacoby Walter have big games. This game, we've got Jada Nunn having 27. There's different ways for them to get it done. And that's what we like to see, kind of the antithesis of a Kansas, where it's like, we know there's multiple options. Now, they're not nearly as deep, and these options aren't nearly as good as some of the other options of, the more elite teams. But this, don't get me wrong, this team is dangerous.
They are very dangerous, and again, they're just like Kentucky, trying to get that defense better every week so they can maybe make a run in March. Let's move on to Wednesday last week, Greg. Only one game here we're going to talk about. Auburn just blows out South Carolina, 101-61. Big game for them. This game was, almost over at the half, 50-28 at the half. Jalen Williams has a pretty big game for them, 23 points. This is a lot of people have kind of been like, oh, South Carolina, I'm not so sure about this one. I don't know. I'm still fine with them.
Yeah, it's I feel like we've done this with a couple of teams this year where we've been like, we're not necessarily worried about the loss with the margin. Everybody had an off night. That's it. I don't really have. This is not. I feel like we say the same thing about a lot of teams, but like, this is not. It makes me wary of South Carolina because it's like, man, that's a pretty big margin, and they're not really missing anybody, and but this is all when Auburn's hitting, man, they're hitting.
It's going to be one of those things where we're going to be looking at the brackets and like, well, Kentucky got blown out by this team, but Kansas got blown out by that team, but Auburn blew out South Carolina, and then Kentucky dominated Auburn for 40 minutes. Like, it's going to be one of those where you have to really make some tough choices.
Do you remember when in late November, early December, I said, this reminds me of the Charlie Day gif where he's standing at the board and there's the little red light.
I think you tweeted it, did
you? I may have, but like, that's this season in a nutshell.
Right. Other than if you want to say UConn and maybe Purdue, even if Purdue's lost this week, I think it's still the same of like those two teams and what everyone says is going to win. Yeah, I think it's
but like even with those losses that both UConn and Purdue have respectively, they're still head and shoulders above. Their tier one is still way above, the next group.
Oh yeah, and South Carolina, we're going to get to another trivia question for Greg here soon. South Carolina has the best win in college basketball this year on the road at Tennessee, according to the net. That is the best win in college basketball. As it's a true road game. Tennessee was, I think, 6th in the net at the time, or 6th in the net now. I don't know. So good for them. It's just you can beat anyone, you can lose to anyone in a way that we haven't seen in a long time, and that's just the Steph Curry effect of shooting threes and having more skill to maybe athleticism, and also the rules letting no one play defense anymore, because if you put a hand on someone, it's a foul. All right, let's go to Saturday, Greg. A lot to get to here. We have Texas A&M and Alabama. Greg, you just love this Texas A&M team. You picked them for this game. Alabama's offense was there. 100 points, 100-75 win. Another game where it looked like they were in control the whole time. Mark Sears needs to be getting more recognition on a national level. I know every single media person in the world has tweeted that out this past week, but he really does. Another one that just adds a blow to Texas A&M's resume because not as much the loss that they lost on the road, but you're now 15-10. Yes, 6 of those wins are quad ones, but you get closer to that 500 mark. The committee kind of freaks out about putting you in the tournament.
You know how sometimes people like write letters to themselves, like for them to read in the future, like dear, future me. I should have written one when we were talking about Texas A&M in the preseason, and I was like, I don't know, Joe. Like, I don't get it. Like, I need to read that every week now. I don't know what. It's just I've hooked onto this team. I've hooked onto Kentucky. I've hooked onto Auburn. They just all happen to be in the SEC. I don't know what it is, but I don't know, man. I'm happy for Alabama that again, this is just a rehash of something I've said before. They had that top 10 net ranking in early in the season when they were like 2 or 3 games over 500. I'm like, what are we doing? This makes no sense. They are filling out that resume. I don't care what you say about Texas A&M. This is a good win, especially with the margin. Good for them. What do you think their ceiling is? You're right. Mark Sears is really coming on strong. I feel like the talk of the town was Grant Nelson when we were talking transfer portal. He's definitely been a factor, but I don't know that. Yeah, I think Dalton Connect has kind of taken over that like king of the transfer portal kind of talk. Not that Grant Nelson's anywhere close to that, but like just who do we talk about in terms of transfers? What do you think that the Bama, what's their ceiling? Because this is one of the things. This is like the anti Wisconsin. They're playing better ball now. They're starting to put it together. They're going to have a big game this weekend. They got really a big week coming up. We don't need to get into it. We'll talk about it when we get to our picks. But what do you think their ceiling is, regardless of what their results are this week?
All right, I'll try to answer this in a way that I would appreciate because I always feel like everyone asks someone, "What's their ceiling?" Well, the ceiling in college basketball these days is Final Four because that's just how screwed up this has been. I'm picking them probably to go to the Sweet 16. I think that's a fair shakeup given everything, and that's kind of like a middle ground of, hey, they're not going to get knocked out soon. They're not going to go too far. Defense has always been an issue for Nate Oates' teams. I do like some of their lineups, like when I mentioned in the past, Grant Nelson's at the 5. It opens things up. I do like Mark Sears. But it is a team that is a little bit different than past years. And even the Sweet 16 kind of makes me a little bit, I don't know, queasy about picking it because Alabama's had their tournament struggles throughout Nate Oates' tenure. So he's been very good at Buffalo, did overachieve at Buffalo. In Tuscaloosa, not as much. So I would say Sweet 16. I don't know if you had a different thought about that, but depending the matchups, I think the farthest I could see me picking them is Sweet 16.
This is not what I think where I'm at is like, this is not a team that I'm going to look at and circle and say, if they're on, the 3, 4, 5 line, I'm picking, that's a hot up. No, this is not a team I'm circling for that. I'm not saying it can't happen. You already said it. It's a crapshoot. Look at the Final Four last year. Anything can happen. But when we're looking top down saying, okay, where do I think this team is? Sweet 16 is probably good. I wouldn't be mad if somebody said, I think, a lot of it will depend on the matchups, bad matchup as some other places like to say, but I think you could say the what you want to stray away from is saying that 20 teams or 35 teams can make the Sweet 16. I don't think we're in that territory. I think that's probably a good fit for this team. I wouldn't be surprised if they found their way into the Elite Eight with kind of the right set of matchups. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they lost if they lost in the round of 32. But I think you hit the sweet spot right there.
I think so. We'll see how the brackets hold up because it's definitely not going to go exactly how I predict. Greg, couple quick ones here. We have BYU losing to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is bad this year. To me, this doesn't change anything for them because I was not in on them to start. They're fun to watch. Like if you get a chance to watch BYU because everyone shoots threes, but I don't like relying on the threes that much. And also, they lost this game because they shot 23% from 3. That's how you lose. So this didn't change anything for me.
Yeah, BYU a lot like, and this is a comment just my wife has made it about Dayton, and they're very similar. And I think I've already mentioned that someone wrote an article about 2 or 3 teams that are so heavily reliant on the 3. And this is just what you get with BYU. It doesn't really change anything because, first of all, they're still sitting at 10 in the net, so it's undeniable that they're a good team. But I mean, they're still going to be that streaky team that if you only got to win 6 games. I'm not saying this team is going to win the national title or anything, but when you're in March, you have one opponent. So maybe that's a better way to phrase it, because saying you only got to win 6 games makes it seem like I think that no. Although clip this if they end up winning, so we sound smart. Mm-hmm. You only have one opponent, and then one opponent 2 days later, and then one opponent. That's it. So you only got to be good for one game to make noise, and then the next game. Couple in a row. We've already seen this team in the Big 12. They've toppled some good teams. You win 2 or 3 in a row. I mean, like this team as if you would have told me this is where this team would be in the preseason, I would have told you were nuts. This team, a top 25 team, I had them nowhere near my radar. And now they're, I don't think they're going to. I think this is one of those teams that, and again, this might just be because of my preseason biases. I think they're going to get upset, and they're going to get upset early. But maybe that Big 12, grueling schedule is just battle harden them, and But I don't like this result for if you're a BYU fan.
I don't either. I just don't like them because you can't rely that much on the 3, and you get in the tournament where the arenas are a little bit different and depth perception is different. But I do like your point. Take it one game at a time and see what happens. That's what's going to matter. I know Xavier head coach Sean Miller said we have 3 different 4-team tournaments we're trying to win. We focus on one weekend, then we move on to the next, then we move on to the next, and that's how you win a tournament or get far in the tournament. Um, Next one up, we have UConn killing Marquette. Wasn't close pretty much at all. I know Greg will hype me up all the time, but I'll say I was 100% wrong about UConn. Didn't think a reload was possible. Didn't think they had enough in the tank to do it this year. It They likely still are not going to do it this year just based on metrics, but they look very good. Crazy that they're blowing out all these good teams and that everything has come together the way it has for them.
Yeah, I started seeing some talk about who's the national coach of the year going to be, and the reason I'm not saying I would pick Dan Hurley, but I can hear with where they now. Yeah, okay, they brought in a 5-star prospect, and they still had Klingon, but you know you basically lost your core from last year outside of Tristan Newton, and your bench big becomes your starting big. And that guy that was hyped in the preseason to be, all American caliber has not even been. I mean, he's played fine. He's not played like people thought he was going to step up. And this team is still, one of two teams that. So is there? I mean, some people said Matt Painter. I don't know. I mean, like, Dan Hurley seems like a good choice to me. I would want to really think about it, and because it doesn't have to be a top 5 team. You could look at a BYU and say, man, they're a lot better than they were supposed to be. Or, I know we've already said Lamont Paris for SEC Coach of the Year, but I mean that's a big enough difference that like you got to consider it. Like we're not talking about a team that was picked 500 that's 5 games over 5. That team was picked. I believe it was like third or fourth last in the SEC, and here they are competing for an SEC title. So, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I mean, this game we can talk about the 28-point spread. I just like if you want to. That's where I wanted to go with this.
Oh yeah, I personally think Lamont Paris still has a really good case. I would say this would be a good year to give Kelvin Sampson the award with what he's done at Houston, improving it in the Big 12 for the first year. TJ Otzelberger, Iowa State's moving up the rankings every week. If you want to go more of even a bigger and more impressive job, I would say, of what he's doing at his school. Amir Abdur-Rahim at USF, we're going to talk about him in a little bit. He's done a very good job as well. So, a big blowout for Marquette, for UConn over Marquette. And Greg, I think it has to be said because I'll put it on me. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I said it. Chauer Kolek, fraudulent Big East Player of the Year, and 7 points in this game. Come on, 2 of 11 shooting, only 3 assists. I mean, it's got me worried. I've been worried. I've mentioned it the whole time that I'm not really in on Marquette going far in the tournament. I think they're a good regular season team. I don't know, man. 7 points against UConn when you like needed them. I don't know. That makes me really weird. I did skip over one game we were supposed to talk about here, Greg. We have Wisconsin and Iowa. Iowa beats Wisconsin, but I think we just mostly want to say like Wisconsin's still sliding, right? Like I don't have anything on this. It's just it looks terrible. It's a terrible loss. Iowa's 15-11. They got to get back on track at some point.
Yeah, the committee was nice enough to put them in the top 16, and then hours later they say, "All right, we still got a little bit of house money to play with. We just lose this game. Yeah, it's in overtime. It won't hurt us." That I just don't. This team has looked terrible. I think what's that 5 out of the last 6 or whatever it is at this point. It was obviously included the 4-game skid. I think they beat Ohio State early in the week. I think that was before Holtman got fired. So obviously that's why they won that game. Thank goodness for them that Holtman didn't get fired before. Otherwise we'd be looking at a 6-game skid for them right now. I don't know, man. Like, have you got thoughts on this team? Like, what's broke? What do they need to fix? Like,
it looks like there's defensive miscommunications. The offense just looks disjointed. I can't give you one thing that makes it look bad, but like it's a little bit of everything there, and it's not looking pretty. And I don't know what the fix is. We've seen teams go on rough stretches for this year and then bounce back, like even Kentucky this past week. But like I don't know if anyone's been on as long of a bad stretch and turned it around this year. I mean, six. I mean, maybe Clemson, Greg. Maybe I don't know.
But man, maybe.
but then they lost to NC State. So who knows? But yeah, I just wanted to mention that they haven't gotten things back on track yet, and they're not to be trusted yet. Let's go to Kansas beating Oklahoma. Now, again, mentioned Oklahoma had a tough week this week with the schedule. Kansas was able to rebound from their loss to Texas Tech. I think the time in between games, they play Texas Tech Monday, they come back play Saturday. I think that time that they had really helped them. It is on the road for Kansas. Hunter Dickinson plays well, 20 points, 16 rebounds. I don't really judge Oklahoma more harshly because of this week. I will say Kansas really, in my opinion, while they got this win, it's still very much the same as what we talked about earlier of, man, it's really hard to trust this team.
I know what the problem for Oklahoma in this game was.
Mm-hmm.
You want to guess?
What?
They were ranked, Joe.
Yeah.
They stayed ranked at 25. All they had to do was be unranked going into this game. So if they have anybody to be mad at, it's the AP voters. Because then we'd have a top 10 team on the road against an unranked team. But they stayed right at 25. So Kansas said, we got them. We could beat these guys. Absolutely.
Well, that is the problem. And also, Greg, the AP voters might just put, they didn't do it this week, but they might just put them in there again just because FAU kept on getting first or top 25 votes after they lost the
Why not?
Let's just keep it up. Let's give us your votes. Just give us your votes. All right, so we talked about those teams enough this week already. We won't go too far into it. Kentucky beat Auburn. We have to talk about this game because we did talk about Kentucky. The same things applied to this game. Rotation was shortened. The defense was there. They slowed things down. They played smart basketball. Auburn, on the other hand, started very, very slow. This was their their first loss at home all year. They did not look good. They were killing teams at home. Like the spread for South Carolina was 11, and they ended up beating them by 40. So this was a very good win. Auburn, there's some things you got to dissect here. First, like Bruce Pearl says, hey, our fans are saying we're blue bloods. You have to stop with that because we're not blue bloods. We just got beat by blue blood. Also, like win a title first, maybe. It's something you can think about. But he just says we're not at the level. Kentucky's very good. Greg, I'll just answer the trivia question for you. This was the second best win in college basketball, was Kentucky beating Auburn on the road in a true road environment. So based on the net. So there we go. So that's Kentucky played well, much of the same we already talked about. They as you said, Greg, they rose their defensive efficiency. They are moving up the AP poll. And for Auburn, they're one of those teams where we're trying to figure them out all year. I still think they're a very good team. I think they can go on a run, but this was just a game that I think was built for them when Kentucky slowed it down, and you have this physical team that has two different waves of players that they use, and they just weren't ready for it.
I won't name the bar, but I have a bone to pick. I was at a bar with my wife, and this game was on. Got to see Baker Mazzara acting a fool. That was cool. And then they turned on the NBA Skills Challenge instead. And I tried watching on my phone, and I don't know if it was just because there was a lot of people in the bar, but reception wasn't good. So I still, even today, plan on going back. I watched most of this game, but I want to watch it start to finish. And I want to give you an opportunity just to bring up the couple points that you did off air. But from the Auburn side of things, the only thing I want to touch on is the Jalen Williams injury. They're saying it's not season ending. That is a good news for them. Mm-hmm. This Kentucky team is good. I don't fault them for losing to this team. It's good that, and I'm glad you mentioned the rise in defensive efficiency. That 25 slot rise comes from two straight good defensive performance. I think they held both teams under 60 points. I think both didn't Ole Miss had 59 as well, or were they just over 60? Okay, so same ballpark of each other. That's two good defensive performances. Let's see them string it. We know this team's got the offense. Let's see them string a couple of these good defensive performances together. Really, really locked down on there. And then you want to talk about what you mentioned on the offense. I just want to make sure you get a chance to touch on that.
I don't know what you're saying specifically.
The floppy.
Oh, so a lot of times they have started to, when they have ball movement, not really happen. I've been mentioning they should go to floppy action. What floppy action is you have two screens on the baseline, and you have a shooter run around them. He can choose which side he goes to. He can run one way and then come back. He can run one way, go all the way through. He can stop midway between if he has an open layup. It's just makes things easy. They've been running it for years. Tyler Hero, Malik Monk for Kentucky. That has opened things up significantly for them. And Antonio Reeves, that is how he's getting points these last couple games. There was a point in the second half where they were running it for 3 or 4 straight possessions almost exclusively, and it was working like a charm. So it's just another added wrinkle, and it's something that Calipari did do, but is incorporating into his new offensive philosophy this year, which is welcomed.
Kind of the opposite of what we were talking about with Kentucky last week, right? Running the same thing 3 and 4 times in a row.
The defense, yeah.
This was so.
Well, true. And also, another point to make, Greg, that you mentioned with defensive efficiency, this defensive performance was against a top 10 offensive efficiency team in college basketball before the game. And then they moved out of it. But just a good performance for them. They've shown they can do it. Now it's just you have to keep it up.
Yeah, put a thumbtack in that thought, because we got some games of theirs to pick. Well, one game of Kentucky's to pick that is going to put this really to the test, and we can talk about that here in a second. So, but we have one more game to recap quickly, Joe, if you want to introduce that.
Yeah, South Florida beats Florida Atlantic. We did pick this last week, I believe, or at least me and you picked it off air, so I should say, but. Florida Atlantic had been struggling in AAC play. I thought it might be a chance to take UCF because they just always, how many times can you play with fire? So it still had the same recipe as all the other FAU games. They get bored, they start slow, they end up putting themselves in a huge hole, they come back. I think Greg said, "Hell, they were down by this much at this point, and 12 minutes to go."
It was 12. It was like 12 with like a minute 10 to go or something. I turned the game off.
Well, that was the second time you had said something about it, because you said the game was. I think you texted me about assuming
it was 20. It was 20. Yeah, it was 23, and I texted Joe. I was like, "All right, what's this look like for USF when they win?"
Yeah. So they got close.
Sorry, Bulls fans. I almost ruined it for you.
They honestly, FAU could have about 9 losses this year. There's some favorable calls. I'm not going to say like it's bad calls, but favorable calls that go their way at the end of games. It's like Wichita State's kind of helped. It kind of helped them against Wichita State. This one they had some at the end that kind of made it close too. But they are still so talented. They dig themselves this hole, and then they like have to force themselves to come out of it, and they always make it close. Like that's the thing is like. It really is them just being bored, and I really don't understand it when you have a new league. We talked about that a lot. And give credit for USF. Amir Abdul-Rahim. Selton Miguel was a flamethrower in this game. Chris Youngblood is also a very good player for them. So really good for them to get this win. And as Greg, you mentioned, build up their resume a little bit because it's pretty weak. But FAU is the most fascinating team in the country.
Think about this. I know we've talked about the FAU experience this year. Remember, their first round game was a weird call away from them being out in the first round, and they ended up in the Final Four.
Yeah.
This team, man, they're. I always say the Andre Curbelo experience, and I trademark it when I put his name in a text to Joe. This is the FAU experience. I don't know. We can, instead of trademarking, we can copyright it or something on a registered trademark, whatever. USF is a good story. Abdur-Rahim turned Kennesaw State. I briefly looked over, what did they look like? His first year, they had like 1 or 2 wins. And by his third year at Kennesaw, they had to play Xavier, unfortunately in the first round, but they made that game close, if I remember it right. And then he got the job, obviously got the job at USF, and there that's it. The resume is light. And this, Joe and I talked about this. He's coming into a job first year American, not first year for USF in the American, but he's thinking, future. And now here we are. It does kind of stink because it's like, man, what if he just put like 1 or 2 more, maybe what, they didn't have to play UConn, but I don't know, something on there that, maybe they do have some quad 3 or they're quad 3 or quad 4 losses. They have 2 of them. I can't remember if they're quad 3 or quad 4, kind of pulling them down a little bit. They don't really have an at-large case. I'm not even sure if they won out the rest of the season. If they'd have one, they probably need to win the tournament. But for Abdur-Rahim as a coach, dude looks like everything he's touches turns to gold. So I don't care if they don't make the tournament. You look at where USF's been the last couple of years, and he steps in a year where teams are losing games they shouldn't.
They're like 18-5 or something. I mean, like, what else can you ask for? They're in a lower level league that, which is feels weird to say now, but that's where we've been at with the American this year. That's about all you can ask for is them. They'll have a chance to compete and maybe win themselves a bid in the AAC tournament. Like, what else can you ask for as a USF fan?
Yeah, they're not quite on the bubble yet. If they win out the rest of the regular season, which includes games against SMU and Charlotte's actually in second place in the AAC right now. You get closer to maybe being on the bubble, and then you just have to, win a couple games, maybe beat FAU in the tournament even before the final. I don't know how it's all going to work out, but it's going to take a lot for them to get that at-large bid, as you said. And you're right. Like the biggest lie people will tell you, oh, we tried to schedule. Like college football, first couple of years of a coach, they'll schedule easy so they can make a bowl game. In college basketball, they will schedule easy so they can build up some decent. Like if this team won like 18 games, it would have been a success for USF. They could build off that, recruit, get transfers in, and say, hey, we're going to be here next year. They did beat Florida State. They did beat Loyola Chicago, who's making a push in the A10 right now. But you're right, they do have those losses like Maine, Central Michigan, Hofstra, and UMass on a weird 4 out of 5 game stretch that's really killing him right now. So good for him. He's done a good job. It's going to take a whole lot more of his team winning to be on the bubble, and honestly, a lot of other teams on the bubble losing. So let's get to our picks for the week, Greg. We've been talking for a while. Let's get to picks here. We have one of the games of the season on Monday night. We have Iowa State and Houston. These two teams are battling to be in the top of the Big 12. Both teams are 9-3. I think if the Big 12 season ended today, or ended before this game, I should say, Iowa State would be the 1 seed technically in the Big 12 tournament. That all changes tonight, possibly.
I am picking Houston. But this Iowa State team is coming on strong, and they are about 0.2 of a second away after losing against Baylor from being, in a really, really good. I mean, I'm not saying this game in and of itself would have a completely different perspective, but like they're what are they 9 today? And I don't have the today's. I know they moved up. I just don't know what they
6.
Yeah, they could be even if they had won that Baylor game, they could be even higher than that. That's scary. I mean, they are a bobbled pass away from that. This is a huge game. Got to be watching this live tonight. After we're done recording, my wife and I are going to go to the gym, and I'm going to convince her. I convinced her to watch South Carolina Auburn with me last week, which turned into just a wonderful game. So I'm sure I could talk her into watching this game with me because I am going to be watching this game live. I hate picking as many favorites as I have with this year the way it's been. I'll pick Houston just because they're at home. No other reason.
Yeah, you're right. They are at home at least, so they're the favorites. I'm going to go Iowa State. Now, Iowa State did beat Houston earlier in the year. I think that might be a reason why I'm going with them here. Houston scored 53 points in that game. Iowa State will bring the defense. I do like this Houston team. I do think they're going to be a team I picked to go far in the tournament. But every team loses games here. I think they might lose this one, even though it's at home, and then they might get back on the right track against Baylor on the road, actually when we pick that game later. So we'll see how that goes. All right.
Third in defensive efficiency on KenPom right now is Iowa State. That's a good point, Joe. Bring up, especially with the score of the last game.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to Tuesday. We have UConn and Creighton. Creighton's had some ups and some downs this year. UConn has really not, to be honest. Seton Hall, is that what you're going to go? Who are you going with?
Yeah, like they've had ups and down. Like they haven't had downs plural. They've had ups and like a down. This game is like a placeholder. Like I am going to go out on a limb and say, well, first of all, Creighton's ranked, so we got the top 10 team against unranked. We got that. No, wait. See, now I'm losing my mind. Did they stay? This is like stuff that I should have pulled up and I don't. But I think they stayed in the back end of the top 25. Did they not?
Creighton's 15.
Okay. Yes, I was to say they were not. I know like 6 teams fell out this week. So I'm trying to keep all that information up here, but this is a placeholder. I can't imagine that either of us are going to pick Creighton. I'm picking UConn, which inevitably means we are going to come back next week and we are going to talk about how Creighton dismantled UConn by 40 points. How could this happen?
I mean, Creighton is starting to hit their stride. It is a home game, and I think people don't maybe I should say this differently. Maybe like casual fans don't understand. Like Creighton's a very tough place to play. They have like a arena that's like 18,000, I believe, and they all like care about Creighton basketball, and it's very good. But it's UConn. They've proven themselves time and time again. I will pick them pretty much in any other game going forward the rest of the season. I think just because even the Big East, like Marquette, they blew them out. So even this game, if they lose this one, I might pick them to win the Big East tournament, win out the rest of the way.
The only other thing I want to get into, and we could just do this real quick. I've now heard two different places mention Greg McDermott's name as getting. This is not like he's in talk, like his agent is in talks with Ohio State or whatever. But like when you're putting if you're not one of the insiders like that knows who the agents are talking to, when you're putting a list together like Joe will often do when a job opens up, you're just kind of saying like, I don't know. Here's who I think would be a good fit because that's all you know. I've heard Greg McDermott tied to, again, just from somebody putting a list together, Ohio State, and I can't remember one other job. It feels strange to me to think about him going anywhere. It's not necessarily like what was going on with Providence and Ed Cooley, but like he's been there forever. I know we talked about the one he had the off the court issue with he made the racial comment about the plantation, but I feel like that's kind of been waxed over at this point. I feel like if Creighton was still in the MVC or something, maybe, but like they're in the Big East, like, does he really want to jump to a job like Ohio State and, be playing against? Okay. All right. You feel different. Go ahead. I'll let you take it away then.
There's many reportings out there that he is not happy at Creighton 100%. There is also a bigger NIL base to draw from. That's something we saw Jay Wright leave coaching because of all the NIL stuff. Villanova, very good program, but private school can't always keep up. I'm not saying it is a better job, but if you're already feeling like you're not 100% happy at Creighton, I'm not sure the new NIL transfer portal era, because again, Ashworth has been playing better. They downgraded this year though. Like Nembhard is a better player, and that is a transfer portal thing. If you don't want to deal with NIL transfer portal or want to go to a place where it's easier to deal with that, yeah, I think you go. I know Creighton's a very good job. It's a very fun job. I just don't know what the ceiling of Creighton is, as opposed to if you go to Ohio State, the ceiling's higher. But you do have to deal with, and you're right, like it's not like good right now, and you have to deal with a lot of apathetic fans who only care about football. So it's a tough thing, but the upside is higher.
Well, Ohio State's they've been there, man. I mean, they've been to a couple. They were there a couple of final. That would be the other funny thing is if I've heard, and I know you and I have already mentioned this again. Just somebody putting lists of names together. Sean Miller's name has been tied to that, but it would be funny. It would be funny if like people were putting out in the universe, not that I ever think this would happen, like what if Sean Miller's back at Xavier and Thad Matta's back at Ohio State,
oh boy.
just for the laughs, not because I think that would actually, I don't know. I just, that would be comedy.
Also, the Silver Bullet, I believe an Ohio State publication, has put out that Chris Holtman has been in contact with DePaul. So
I did see that today, so I'm glad you brought that up.
There you go. If you're wondering where Chris Holtman might go next, DePaul might be it. All right, let's go to Baylor and BYU. This one is at BYU. Greg, which one are you going with here? Who are you going with?
I'm picking Baylor hesitantly, but I can't get on this BYU train. But that means they're going to go 17 of 19 from three, and they're going to win by 25 points because that's how this works at this point.
Yeah, I'm going to go Baylor. I'm not, as I said, not as big on BYU with the threes. But you're right, the home court advantage scares me, especially like they're up in the mountains too. The elevation gets to some teams, and not something a lot of the Big 12 teams are used to. So we could come back and say we're idiots next week.
I don't think that's something we talk about a lot in basketball. And I know it's because it's an indoor sport, but I feel like every time you hear somebody's going to Denver to play in the NFL, like it gets talked. It doesn't get talked. I don't know why, because just because you're inside doesn't mean like the air is still being pulled from outside. You know what I mean? Like they're still, maybe it's not as big of a factor, but it's something to think about.
It does still matter for sure. Greg, let's go to Wednesday. We have Florida and Alabama. Florida is newly ranked this week. Alabama is just moving up the rankings. It should be a fun SEC game.
Florida, one of the 75 teams that came into the top 25 this afternoon, which is why I can't even keep track of who's in and who's out. I'm picking Bama. I did not pick them to beat Texas A&M, and I rue myself for having done that, although I may rue one of my later picks. But I'll take Bama. I haven't watched a ton of Florida this year. You and I have talked a little bit about, the pieces they have and what they could be, what they need, what they need to be and whatnot. But I'll take Bama at home.
Tickets are only $4, Greg. You can make a little road trip here.
What's the drive? Auburn was 9 hours. What's the drive?
Oh, I have no idea. But Florida does rebound very well, and they can shoot. They have a couple of different guys who can shoot. I'm going Alabama, though. I like their offense. I do, like I mentioned, like Grant Nelson at the 5. I think if they do that more, it's going to lead to more good offensive possessions for them. I think they're kind of hitting their stride. Going to be tough to beat them. So, yeah, I'll take Alabama here. Next one up, let's go to Thursday. We have Washington State and Arizona. Washington State is moving their way up bracketologies right now and ranked 21st in the AP poll this week.
Yeah, another one of those is kind of like UConn Creighton. Like, this is kind of a placeholder. I don't think either of us is going to pick Arizona to lose at home against Washington State. But Washington State has kind of been creeping up, just like you said. I heard a couple of people maybe even as early as 2 weeks ago start saying, hey, man, they got an at-large case. And it's, out in that Pac-12 West Coast basketball, sometimes you just kind of get lost in the vacuum of anonymity. But here they are. They're on the national media's radar, which is not always good because I saw some people were maybe talking about ranking Michigan State this week, which we can get into another time. But I'm taking Arizona at home.
I'm taking Arizona at home. I guess we're not picking this next game. I'm picking Washington State to pull in Indiana State. I think you get into the top 25 and you just kind of get your head up high. You lose 2 games. Arizona State are the 2 road games this week. It's a tough road trip for them. Very far distance. Arizona, I think, is more legit. I think Arizona State's just fatigue at that rate. But doesn't mean, like, they'll probably go from being an 8 seed right now, a lot of bracketologies, to going down to being like a 10. I don't think it really kills their case. It's just going to be a tough week of scheduling there. All right, let's go to Saturday's games. Houston and Baylor. This one's at 12 p.m. Eastern time.
Got a couple of really good games, especially the ones that we're picking on Saturday. I will pick Baylor at home, and I will not say anything else because picking Big 12 games at this point is like pulling teeth.
Picking a lot of road teams this week, but I'm going to pick Houston. I do really like them. I just think Iowa State presents a difficult matchup, and I think after they get 5 days of rest, what is that? Is that right? 4 days of rest after that before this game. I think they can settle down and get the win on the road. Baylor's offense is good. Their defense just leaves you something to be desired. So Houston for me in that first matchup on Saturday. Let's go to Alabama at Kentucky. This one's 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Should be a fun one at Rupp.
Okay, I was pulling it up. I don't know if you know off the top of your head. I'm assuming this is not Kentucky's only game of the week, correct? They play early in the week, but it's not somebody notable because I didn't have it in our picks.
It is. They play at LSU.
Okay, so I'd like to say we assume that they'll win that game, but we didn't. I don't think we brought up that LSU beat South Carolina this week, or did I? No, we did. Yeah, we didn't bring it up. I think I meant to put something in there about that, but didn't. So who knows with LSU? But this game is kind of what I was alluding to. I'm picking Kentucky. Can't quit that offense. And here is. I mean, we've got this Bama offense that's been rolling. Here's Kentucky's chance to say, hey, this is what we can do. Bama is there. I was just looking at KenPom while we were talking. They're also 75th or 73rd, I think, in defensive efficiency. So this game, if you see a nice little over of, what do you think? Like it's got to start at like 140 or 150. I gotta imagine they're gonna put it in that area. If you see 135, put your house on it because I can't imagine this game is not getting into the 80s unless Kentucky has a really good defensive performance. Which, I mean, that's what those fans want to see right now. I'll take Kentucky hesitantly just because I like them to ride their what will hopefully be their fourth straight good defensive performance, assuming they do well at LSU.
Last week, Greg could have free tickets. This week, he can get into Rupp Arena for $139, baby. I'm going Kentucky to win. I would not advise people to take the over, personally. I think this is a lot different of a team than what we have seen in the past. They are pressuring the ball to slow other teams up. So they have DJ Wagner pressing full court so that other teams don't get 30 seconds to run their offense. Kentucky is not scoring as much the last couple games. This is the recipe for success. They're slowing it down. It is, both these teams could very well go off for 90 points each and have a very good over. I just think with how things have gone, not really the pick there. I do think, sorry, go ahead.
To be fair, Joe, this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say you can't just look at the nut, because I'm like, what are you talking about, Joe? This is two highly ranked offensive efficiency and lowly ranked. You're bringing up those points. If you're not watching the games, you're not watching the X's and O's, you'd miss stuff like that. And those are really good points that, I just want to point out, this is why you got to watch the games too.
Well, it could change. There's Kentucky strategies changed week in and week out. The past week that what worked was, again, shortening the rotation, better defensive help in terms of, and also not overhelping. Overhelping has been a bigger problem for them than even helping. And just the pressure is really not let people get into the rhythm on offense, and I'm a big fan of that because they have depth. So I'm going Kentucky. Alabama's been a shooting team forever. If they don't hit their shot, like a team that's relying on the three, if they don't hit their shots, they lose. They could be tough Rupp Arena environment, and also that defense coming along. So I'll get Kentucky. Could have my heart broken again, but we'll see. Let's go North Carolina at Virginia. This one's also at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Greg, I think we're picking this game for one specific reason, so I'll let you get to it.
I'm picking. This is my chaos game for the week. I can't pick all favorites, all whatever. At least Virginia's at home, so I'll take Virginia to slow the game down. They did win a game earlier this week against Wake Forest. I think I saw they shot like 11% from the free throw line and won, which is historic. So they win games 49-47. We'll just see. This is not this that I'm picking with. This is all straight, just like this season has been crazy. So here's my crazy pick for the week.
All right, I'm going to go with UNC. I think they've had tough times, so I could definitely see them losing, especially on the road. But too much talent to lose to a team who routinely puts up 40 points per game sometimes. So that's what I'll go with. Greg, I have to admit, I thought your crazy pick of the night was going to be Texas A&M beating Tennessee on Saturday night, but it seems like you're holding off on that one.
That game, no, it's not even. It's not even, and I'm glad you mentioned that. It's not even in our picks for a reason. There's another game happening this weekend or this week that is not in our picks that we talked about several times. I will give you a hint. It is from a league that we now think is probably going to be one bid, and at one point had a top 10 team. It's these two teams it's part one. They face each other twice towards the end of the season. FAU, I didn't even put it on our list of picks. You think it was worth picking this week?
No, there's no ranked team in the match. It's not even...
Right. not forget ranked team. I like both of these teams are Memphis is out. Like they're out. So I'm assuming you got them at your last bracketology was at
Tuesday,
last week,
February 13th. So yeah, last Tuesday.
Were they even in then?
No, they're not even in the next four out.
Yeah,
so
right.
They're out, and FAU is approaching being out if they don't finish off strong. And also, they're not even playing for like, hey, maybe like this team could have the 1 seed and this team could have the 2 seed based on what happened. No, they're in third and fourth place, I think, right now in the AAC. If not lower for Memphis, I don't even know, but I know it's Charlotte and USF at the top. So definitely with you on that. Not worth picking that one. Go FAU though. I think they're going to win, but for sure. But I did think you were going to take Texas A&M over Tennessee. Glad you're coming down to earth with Texas A&M a little bit. They could be 15-12 after this week, Greg. It's a little scary. I do want to see them in March, so I'm hoping they turn around, but we'll see. Any final thoughts for the week, Greg?
Yeah, you mentioned Loyola, and I just wanted to bring up that my Christmas present to my wife. Dayton is playing on the road now that Loyola is in the A10. Dayton is playing at Loyola. That game is March 1st. We are going to Chicago. A game that I mean, like Loyola, I think, okay, maybe a decent team. I didn't think they were going to be a bottom dweller. This might really play into who wins the A10. I don't know if you've looked at the A10 standings, but it's pretty much Dayton, Loyola, and Richmond at the moment. I think like George Washington or George Mason might be 4th or 5th, but I don't really think they're going to play it. But it's kind of a 3-team race right now, and we're going to be going to a game. She was kind of upset because she was supposed to go out of town this weekend, and she sold our tickets, so she was bummed about that. And I'm like, looking ahead, I'm like, we might be going to one of the most important Dayton games of the year. So we'll just have to see.
Okay, my final thought, I'll build on that train. I mentioned I went to Rupp Arena last Tuesday to watch Kentucky and Ole Miss. I've been to a Wright State game, Wright State, Youngstown State, go Gwins. I've been to a Dayton game. I went to a UC versus Stetson game. I've coincidentally graduated from Xavier, worked for Xavier's social media team. Did not go to a Xavier game this year. But I am possibly going to a Miami, Ohio game coming up. And also decided to... Life's too short not to do things when you have stuff on your bucket list. My dad wants to go see Hinkle Fieldhouse. Taking my dad for his birthday, an early birthday present, to see Xavier and Butler at Hinkle Fieldhouse, I think the first week of March. So I'm excited for that. It's been a lot of fun seeing a lot of you live in Cincinnati area, you have so many different, even smaller, bigger places you can go see. I would love to see a game at Louisville, specifically this year when they stink too. So we'll try to make the rounds. We'll try to get to some more games. But that's just... It's a good point. As you mentioned before, we always try to point out when we go to games, and that's just, I think Xavier Butler would be fun.
There's probably more entertaining things you could see this year at the Yum Center. I know you're obviously I'm a college basketball guy too. I'm just saying, I think there's probably better events that you could attend at the KFC Yum Center.
I need to go down and see Bellarmine at Freedom Hall instead of seeing the Yum Center. I mean, I don't know.
Hey, I will. Let's do it. Let's call Rob Haynes. Can we get this in the game house budget? We'll take the Taylor Swift private jet down there. Take a nice little 5-minute plane ride down there, touchdown right on I-265 or whatever it is.
We're business partners. Why don't I just take the credit card and just do it? I mean, just ask for forgiveness. We'll just figure it out.
I love it.
But honestly, we wouldn't need any money to go to those games besides gas money because, well, it's close enough to drive home, and also the reason why
it can't be more. Yeah,
I would want to go.
Can't be more like $10.
I want to go to Louisville this year because I think the tickets are like $2 to see. Like you can go see like UNC versus Louisville for like $2 because UNC is not going to travel all the way up to Louisville, especially for weekday games, and it's a 21,000 seat arena, so they're not going to sell out. So just thought I'd update everyone. I think that's going to be pretty much definite on both those. We're going to go to those games, but been trying to see more live games, trying to see more arenas. It's a lot of fun to do. And kind of rank which arenas I like best, which I don't like best, and Greg's going to a lot of Dayton games as well, and been a lot of fun to do that. So, all right, so that's the final thought for the week. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a review. Ask any questions you have heading into March, any teams you want us to hear us talk about, any players you want to hear us talk about. We'll be here as we go through this college basketball season. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.